Welcome to the Navigating Disability, where we explore resilience, innovation, and inclusion. I'm joined by my co-host, Jen Abbott. Welcome, Jen.
Good morning.
Today, we are absolutely honoured to speak with Dr. Hoby Wedler, a scientist, entrepreneur, and sensory expert. Born completely blind, Hoby defied expectations, earning a Ph.D. in organic chemistry and pioneering groundbreaking sensory experiences. From leading accessible science education to co-founding businesses like SensePoint and Hoby's Essentials, his work reshapes how we perceive ability and inclusion. Hoby was recognised by President Barack Obama as a champion of change and listed in Forbes 30 under 30 in the food and drink category. Hoby's contributions have made significant waves. His journey exemplifies how embracing challenges can lead to an extraordinary innovations. Join us as we explore Hoby's remarkable path, his insights on sensory perception, and his unwavering commitment to inclusivity. Let's get started. Welcome, Hoby.
Kate and Jen, thank you both so much for the very flattering introduction. And I'm just so excited about what you're doing with this show and all that it stands for. And I can't wait to chat. So I feel totally honored to be invited today.
Thank you so much. Tell us about your story. It's so inspiring.
Thank you.
You're fully blind. Can you tell us about your journey and how you've ended up where you are today?
I can't wait to tell you about that. It might take a few minutes, but bear with me and we'll get there for sure. So it was interesting. I was born without any eyesight, and my parents had no idea that I was going to be born this way. They did all the proper genetic testing. They looked into any causes of disease that they should know about. They really looked into, everything that might be affecting both of their kids. My brother was born 2 years previously or 2 years before me and is fully sighted. So they saw nothing and they just thought it was going to be a normal birth of a normal baby, and it was a totally normal birth. But the second I was delivered, the doctors looked at me, or probably seconds after, and said, "Yeah, there's something major wrong with his eyes." And what they realized is that I had a condition called microphthalmia, which is a very small eye, and it's not something that can be picked up genetically. It's really unknown and it's super rare. So it's like, what do we do with this? And there's a funny story here. My mom called her best friend from college when I was 12 hours old, and said her husband answered, and uh, my mom was saying, "Oh, I hope he's okay, but he's perfectly healthy, but he was born blind, and we don't think he'll be able to get his eyesight back." And this woman's husband was saying, "Oh no, this is just terrible. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to deal with it?" And my mom's friend, being the person who she is, really wanted to know what was going on, abruptly grabbed the phone out of his hand and said, "What's going on?" And my mom explained, "Yeah, Hoby was born, but he's born blind." And Barb said, "Oh my God, I thought he was dead. We can deal with blind. That's no big deal. That's no problem." So if I ever write a book, it might be called "I'd Rather Be Blind Than Dead," which is true. Um, but I'll tell you how that ties in here and how that relates to both the conversation that we want to have here, and to I think your overarching mission overall. You know, the reason that my mom's best friend Barb was totally okay with blindness is because when she was growing up, her father, who's a professor of psychology, his best friend was also a professor of psychology who happened to be blind. And the blind man was the handyman. Anything that needed to get done, they called John. And John came and fixed it. The dishwasher broke, well, John will fix it. The washing machine breaks, that's John's job. That's no problem. Even problems with cars, John would fix. He was just a total normal person. And when you're a young child growing up around this, it becomes suddenly no big deal. And I want to take a minute to reflect on that maybe a little later in the show. But just as it comes back to disability, the more that we know and the more that we're disarmed, the less of a big deal the disability becomes as a whole, right? And I think that is so incredibly important to acknowledge and to embrace, is that disability is not really a big deal unless we make it a big deal. And society likes to make our disabilities a big deal. So, flashback to the scene of my parents I'm, a week old, and they had a couple of choices. They could have taken a choice of having very low expectations of me and what I could do, or they could take the choice of having super high expectations. And they chose the latter. And I'm so grateful they chose the latter because it allows me to thrive and succeed. And, you know, they never lowered the bar. So they found a group, beautiful nonprofit, then totally active here in Northern California called the Blind Babies Foundation when I was about 2 weeks old. And they came in, and ever since that time, when I was 2 weeks old, they pushed my parents to get me to do things that other kids would do, maybe in a slightly different way. And my parents, as I grew up, taught my brother and me both that there's no substitute for extraordinarily hard work. And if you're going to succeed in the world, whether you're disabled, non-disabled, blind-sighted, whatever the case may be, you got to work hard and you got to put your all into everything that you're doing. And that to me was just a wonderful thing. We'd often get done with school, come home and spend, for me, maybe 3 or 4 hours on homework. For my brother, maybe 2 or 3. Things take longer when you're blind, just do. And then, especially during the summer, we'd go work on the house until dark. My parents had a great plan of never hiring anyone to do anything. So my brother and I had to learn how to fix things, how to solve problems. And it was then when I fell in love with my two biggest passions. And one came strongly from my mom's arena, which is cooking and understanding how flavors come together. My dad does a lot of that too. And the other one came from my dad's passion, which is plumbing and electrical, and really understanding. I've always loved, and to this day, it fascinates me, and I spend time thinking about it for sure. Like, where does a water molecule start? And how does that water molecule end up coming out the tap in your sink or out the tap in your shower? And then where does it go once it leaves, right? What is its path? And how can we guide its path using good plumbing, right? So I grew up at we had a tiny summer cabin up on a lake near Lake Tahoe in California, and our water came from either a tank up the hill or down in the lake, and we pumped it up. And I took the time with my father to understand that system. And to this day, I think I'm one of a very small group of people that fully understands that plumbing system, who always inevitably gets calls when the system is having problems. And I try to stay under the radar that I really understand the system so I don't have to fix everybody else's problems. But, I can do it if needed. Um, and this all led me to love science, flavor science. What I realized when I was cooking food in my parents' kitchen, my chores might have been slightly different than my brother's, but when I was 9, 10, 11 years old, one of my major chores was cooking for the household, cooking dinners. And what I typically would do is cook large pots of soup and stew that freeze very well, that people could take with them as lunches to avoid the unhealthy alternatives that we might eat out. And quite frankly, out of the freezer, you have easy weeknight dinners. So that made everything come together really well. When I was 10 years old, my gift from my parents for my birthday was a 38-liter soup pot. It was kind of fun. And it was good stuff, and what I realized is as I was in my kitchen, often alone, playing with flavors and blending flavors and aromas and textures in the soup pot, my friends were doing similar things, but with visual art on their easels and etch-a-sketches and this sort of thing. So for me, it was a similar process, but I was accomplishing good work for the family as I did it. And what great fun to be able to have that opportunity and do that. And then the science came because of my love of plumbing and electrical and putting things together and taking them apart and understanding that. And in high school, I fell in love with organic chemistry. And that's when I decided that it makes a lot of sense to study chemistry. I had an instructor who didn't think that maybe I should study chemistry as a blind guy. But there's got to be a way that I can explain to her this is my passion, and what I should be able to pursue my passion. And what I came up with was the fact that nobody can see atoms. You know, we might look at a reaction flask and see some temperature changes or gases being evolved or this sort of thing. But truthfully, nobody can see an atom. So chemistry is a cerebral science. And from that day, went from being kind of a skeptic to a forever ally. to me, and it was just a great deal of fun to work with her and have her get excited about me pursuing chemistry at the college level. And because by virtue of having such a great high school honors chemistry teacher, I decided that I wanted to teach. And I did not want to teach just upper division chemistry that was a challenge for, people, or, an upper division organic chemistry course. I wanted to teach chemistry to freshmen in college. Freshmen in college who thought that chemistry was a boring prerequisite that they had to get out of the way for what they really wanted to study. And I wanted to make that 8 a.m. class on a Monday morning feel like a ton of fun. That was my goal. And if I wanted to teach at a college or university, I had to attend graduate school, which I did, and worked under an amazing mentor, Professor Dean Tantillo, who studies computational organic chemistry at the University of California, Davis. So my work was on the computer. And that I had the honor of teaching many chemistry classes to freshman students, general chemistry, introduction to chemistry, and while I was a graduate student. And what I realized in that process was that my students didn't like learning chemistry by having it spoken. I bring in beautiful PowerPoints and talk through them. They wanted a professor who would point to things and say, this is what you need to understand. This goes here and that goes there. And watch this little video animation. And then that's all you need to know for the test on Friday, this sort of thing. So spending a great deal of time and expense making my lectures accessible to my students, which in turn made them less accessible to me. And I thought, what else can we do? What else have I done? And that's when the food and beverage stuff popped into my life in a big way. So I did or end up earning my PhD in organic chemistry, and I've happened upon a career where I use my chemistry every day in the work that I do. I'm a total consulting scientist, mainly in food and beverage. But let me tell you that what got me there was actually while I was ending undergraduate and beginning my graduate tenure, I got a call from the film director, Francis Ford Coppola, who produces wine as well. And his team said, hey, we want someone who is blind, who also knows a lot about wine. My parents made wine, but never studied it academically. I actually ended up taking some intro to winemaking and wine appreciation courses out at the University of California, Davis, because I live in California wine country. I'm in Sonoma County. And it's always these little hyper local things, much like plumbing and electricity, of how can something be grown virtually in my backyard and then packaged up into this amazing product and sent all over the world as a premium good was very intriguing to me. So I honed my palate with friends and that sort of thing. And I was the right person to design this truly blindfolded tasting experience. He gave me the reins and let me run with it. And what we built was an experience that did not make blindness or temporary vision loss gimmicky at all. If you've heard of the dining in the dark experiences, this was not like that at all, because it is not like that. We don't want to put a blindfold or put someone in a dark room and then give them a fork and expect them to do, to eat normally, because they've never had practice there. We use the blindfold as a way of refocusing our attention. And we either serve little bites that people can consume with their fingers or nothing at all and just worry about beverages. And what's been amazing about these experiences over the past well over 10 years is that we've seen people just blossom into someone who didn't know much about wine to people who are passionate about tasting wine, and not only wine, but any product we use. And my advisor in graduate school was amazing. This experience took off with the Coppola sales team after about a year. And my laptop was my laboratory. I had an advisor who said, no, don't worry about, being in lab from 8 to 8 every day. Go explore these other things, because these might become real career opportunities for you. So I did. And when I graduated, this whole idea of becoming a non-visual sensory guide to the greatest things life has to offer came to fruition. And I went to my childhood friend, now life and business partner, and said, I think we can do something with this. He's very entrepreneurial, grew up in a family-owned retail store. And it's like, yeah, let's start something here. Let's see what we can do. So the tastings took off. We found ourselves doing a great deal of like scientific consulting on water used in food and beverage products. And, a lot of this consulting has actually led to building products and developing products for people. And it's just a ton of fun. And now I'm working on other ways by video and audio that I can really be this non-visual sensory guide to, like I said, the greatest things life has to offer. And in doing my consulting science and my product development work, I'm able to bring things full circle back to chemistry. And I want to share much more about some of the work that we've done with blind folks and other folks with disabilities as it pertains to chemistry. But I want to pause there because I feel like I've been talking for a long time and find out if you have
No,
any.
we're completely absorbed in it, Hobie. So yeah, it's you've got an amazing story. It's
I
wonderful.
do have a couple of questions, Hobie, and I want to take you back to that time when you were born and your
Yeah,
parents were, wow, at 12 years old, I've got a child with a disability. What I heard you say was you wouldn't be the person you are today if your parents hadn't have seen your or hadn't have supported you and pushed you and didn't see you as disabled. Would that
that's
be
a
a
hundred
correct?
percent correct.
Yeah.
And what I try to do in my work of helping others with disabilities today is half helping the person, but the other half helping their family realize that it's not a big deal.
100%. And I look at when it's any sort of disability, there are some parents who speak to the medical experts, the specialists who have done a lot of study in whatever the disability is, and they say, this is what your child will be able to do. And a lot of them give up hope and they
They
don't
do.
push their children. They don't have any expectations because they
You got
say,
it.
well, this is your life. Now,
And they
based
don't
on,
bother to learn
and they don't
about
bother to
what
learn.
possibilities are out there.
And what I've heard, not just from talking to you, but my own experience with my own children,
Yeah.
is every single person has potential that they can reach if
Oh
they're
gosh,
given the
yeah.
opportunities to learn the way that they learn, to learn the way that suits them, and to be given hope and confidence that they can do it.
And I hope you're tough with your kids too, and don't let them get away with anything.
I'm getting tougher. Uh,
Because that's important, I'm sort of teasing when I say that, but it's all about the opportunities that we afford them. It's
no,
all
one
about the opportunities.
100%. And when I talk to people about my children's autism,
Yeah.
I don't do that. Like autism is not an excuse.
No,
It's a reason for their behavior. So if they have
exactly.
bad behavior, they are pulled up on it just like anybody else is.
Mm.
Mhm.
But we can understand why that what led to that behavior and then we can deal with it.
You
So
got it.
I
Oh, I love
really
that.
admire your parents and how they didn't let your disability stop you.
No,
How
no,
did
and my mom actually embraced disability education. She had an interesting experience where she was going to school well, she got her teaching credential, went on and taught math and science to 12-year-olds for 7 years and hated the disciplinarian side of it. And this is a few years before I was born that she decided to leave that profession and thought about maybe going into nursing because she really wanted to help people. And then stepped away from that. And when I was born, got into special education and was introduced to this opportunity in this field of study where she could be a teacher of the blind, not only in terms of helping them make their materials in classrooms accessible, but also teaching them how to navigate the world with a white cane.
and this was
And
before you were born.
no, this is ironically 2 years, 3 years after I was born that she was told about this opportunity. She was in special ed, but it was like, hey, why don't you think about getting a master's degree in blind services? And she did, and she ended up being a teacher of the visually impaired for 35 years. So she took the bull by the horns, as we say, and just ran with it and made it all. I mean, she embraced it. So did my dad, but she was like, yeah, this is gonna be my life, my profession.
But could you imagine if, that didn't occur and you were stuck at home with no expectation, no
I can't
belief in
imagine.
yourself that you could achieve things?
I cannot imagine. The biggest gift that's ever been given to me is the gift of high expectations. And the other one, and this is a little more subtle, but I think it's so incredibly important. I don't care if you're quadriplegic, normal ambulatory, blind, deaf, sighted, hearing, whatever the case may be, we all have to do our personal best and take responsibility for our actions. So that if something works as we're going about it, we get to, earn the credit for it working. But if something fails and doesn't work, we kind of need to take the blame for it.
Yeah. And I think
Absolutely.
that's just in everyday life, right? For anyone out
I
there,
think so.
you know,
I think so. And
every
I'm
mistake
so,
is a lesson.
it is, and I'm someone who just loves taking on challenges. I thrive and live by challenging myself and pushing myself to the limits and really being able to figure out how I can work, and challenge myself. Because when I challenge myself and I succeed, I think you guys would agree with me that you just feel so good. And
Oh,
that
it's amazing.
confidence that you gain from it, it's almost addicting.
Yeah.
So, do you think it was the confidence that your parents gave you, the self-confidence that led you to where you are today, or was it the expectation?
It was both. It was believing in myself, but it was also expecting nothing less than the best.
And you mentioned your chemistry teacher, and
Yeah,
I
that was
find that a
amazing.
really interesting story because she probably would have put you in the bucket of this can't be done, he can't see, he can't. You actually showed her as a teenager of a different way of doing something.
There's a funny backstory there, and I think that one of the most important things that those of us who have disabilities need to learn how to do is to educate rather than get mad and litigate. So my tagline expression has always been educate, don't litigate, right? And make the world a great place based on the way that you teach people what you can and cannot do versus, trying to push them to let you do things that maybe you can do. And for me, having the heart of a teacher has been the biggest advocacy tool in my toolbox all along from grade school, primary school to what I do today. It really does all tie together in that way. And I just love being able to teach people what I can do. So the funny backstory with my high school chemistry instructor is that she was afraid I was going to blow myself up in lab. That was her biggest fear. And she said, I don't think honors chemistry makes sense for you. You should go talk to the regular chemistry instructor. And mind you, this is the teacher who I had for freshman physical science. So she and I knew each other. We had a relationship. And she said, do you really want to take the test and see if you can get into honors chemistry? I said, yes, I do. So she gave me the test. And when I got the high score on the test, it was her job to say, oh, maybe you do want to be in honors chemistry. Okay. And it was still a fear of how I was going to make the lab accessible. What we did, and this is just one of these um, sort of, or not to use a pun about chemistry, but organic accommodation thoughts that we all had was let's find a student who's taken the course before me. I was a junior in high school. We found someone who was a fourth year, a senior, and said, let's build this and do this together, with this other student working with me and as my lab assistant, as my eyes, and also as a scribe on exams and sometimes on homework sets as well. And it just worked perfectly. But still, I would talk to that instructor. I would go in. I was a diligent student. I always have been a pretty diligent student. I would go into her classroom either after hours or during a planned tutorial period and review the materials that we'd already talked about. And I would say, you talk to the class about how chemistry is so valuable. So, it's everything around us. We eat it, we drink it, we live it, we breathe it, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't you tell us that maybe we should think about studying chemistry as something beyond the prerequisite that we think it is. And I said, that's me. And I started talking to her like this, probably the third, fourth week into the school year. And she'd say, yeah, but it's going to be hard. You're going to have to convince so many people and it's going to be impractical. And that's what led me to about halfway through the school term, telling her that, look, nobody can see atoms, and I think we should just partner on this and be allies about it. So that was a great experience. And I think the lesson there is just to whatever you do, and you're gonna hear me say this a lot. whether you have a disability or not, I think it's good practice to just be able to relate to people and help them understand you. You know, she might teach me chemistry, but I might teach her how to work with a blind student.
And that is so true. And I've written down a couple of your comments that you've made that have stuck with me and I absolutely love. I'd rather be blind than dead. Well, that is such a simple comment, but it's so true. I love that. Educate, don't litigate. Now,
Yeah.
that's what this podcast is all about, trying to educate people, because a lot of us haven't, and I am one of these people. Until I had autistic children, I had
Yeah.
no idea what disability was.
So
And my
interesting. And
whole
you
life,
embraced it.
well, I didn't really have a choice, but I did embrace it, and it's changed everything about me. It's changed my parenting journey, it's changed me as a person, and it's led me on the path now in 2025 to speak to someone from the US who's blind about disability. Like, what an amazing journey is that? But
I
the
love it.
other, sorry, Hoby, the other thing I came up with just listening to you before was I'm a firm believer that there is a solution to every problem, no matter
Oh,
what the problem
yes.
is. Um,
Yes.
and it might not come to you straight away, but you work on it and you work on it and it will come to you. So it's exactly what you've just said. You had this passion. We just had to work out a way to make it work.
Can I make a comment here? You just triggered something in me that's so incredibly important. Um, we are only as disabled as the world around us makes us. So the only reason I might be perceived as being disabled or not as efficient is because of the designs of things that I interact with around me and systems that might interact with around me are not necessarily designed to be as inclusive of me as possible. I'm going to give you a really silly example. You might laugh at me, but it's fine. Um, Take a clothes washing machine. Now in the 21st century, they're covered with LEDs and buttons that who knows what they do and knobs. Well, I bought a machine that claimed to be accessible, and 97% of this machine is accessible. The problem is I share the machine, and when I shut it off, it powers back up to whatever the last user had it set on, and I have no darn way to set it to the setting that I need it set on without asking someone. And sure, there are services that I can call with my phone, but this washer was purchased. I'm cheap. I purchased this 8 years ago before the time of machines and appliances that were run by apps. But this washing machine makes me feel disabled, not my blindness. And I hope I've illustrated that example, just piggybacking and entirely making a corollary to your statement that every problem has a solution.
Yeah, and that is so true. We are only disabled as the world perceives us to be. And Jen, I think you'd agree that we have heard that over and over and over in the interviews that we've done previously.
And we have. Yeah.
It's the world and it's the environment that disables us. It's not actually what is perceived to be my
And
disability.
that's why we want to collectively take the dis out of disability because it's
Exactly.
not a disability. It's everyone has their own abilities and
Yep.
it's how we use them and achieve things from that that matters.
And isn't it true when we think about it and we put this all into perspective, um, you know, disability is just a nuisance. It's just part of who we are. Like, I was never identified as Hoby, the blind kid. I was Hoby, a smart, nice kid who just so happened to be blind. And that change of making disability go from identity to a trait, like
Yeah,
someone might have brown eyes, is so important.
absolutely.
I couldn't, that is like, if people get nothing else out of our interview, understanding disability as a trait rather than an identity is so incredibly important. Like, Jen, I imagine your dad
Yeah.
never went around once he was diagnosed with Parkinson's and said, "Hi, I'm so and so, the guy you know now with Parkinson's."
Yeah. Never.
right?
He
That'd
was
be
just
weird.
my dad, and we never
Yes.
treated him any different. He
No.
was an able-bodied person right up until a certain age, and then he was struck down with Parkinson's, but he lived his life, and we
Exactly.
didn't treat him any different. And I think that's absolutely key, that no one wants to be treated any different than the next person, and that's what we need to come back to.
It's so true. I
Hoby,
really, I
sorry.
love this conversation we're having.
Oh, so
As
do
do
I.
we.
Yeah, this is the crux of what we want to get to.
Yeah.
So many people feel stuck or limited by their circumstances, by their disability. How do you push past those when you feel that something's not going your way? How do you overcome that challenge?
It's really hard. Um, it's really hard to do. That's what I'll say very candidly. But it is entirely possible and entirely doable if you put yourself in the frame of mind of reminding oneself what you have done before and saying, this is just another challenge. This is just another problem I have to solve. And then sitting back and thinking through, how did we solve that problem before, or a similar problem, or even a totally different problem? It's about stepping back, taking a deep breath, and figuring out how to solve the problem. So I was really, really frustrated at, haven't admitted this to many people, when I realized that teaching chemistry was not my strong suit because of my disability, and that a lot of other instructors had a great advantage over me because they could see and point to things and write on the board. And I've never been one who's wanted to work with assistants for everything I do. So the thought of having an assistant in the room helping me, pointing at things, explaining things visually that I explained auditorily, just never resonated with me. And I never thought about it until later on that I went towards this tasting in the dark model where the thing that people might think of as a disadvantage became a game-changing advantage. I don't see my senses are no more heightened than yours. I'm sure of it. I can hear and smell and taste and feel just as well as you both can. But I have learned to use my senses differently for my survival and enjoyment of the life that I live. So it's taking this thing that people see as a problem and turning it into an advantage that is truly game changing, right? And that's like, if you can think of a way, whether you're disabled or not, of taking the thing that everybody judges you for and turning it into your superpower, then you realize everything is overcomable.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I
And
think
boy,
that'll resonate in our community as well.
I want to challenge your listeners. Everybody has a superpower. I want you to think of what your strengths are, what your gifts are, and what superpowers you deliver to the world. Think of it, write it down, and never forget it because these will guide you through everything you do.
And Hobie, just listening to that, all I could think about was you could be talking about anybody, whether they have a
Totally.
Yeah.
disability or not. It's not just people that are related, have a disability. That's
No,
exactly the same for me or for anybody
it's
else.
everybody. And I tell everybody that.
And I
Without a
think that's
doubt.
the key message, right? Is like,
Right.
regardless of your abilities, we're all here doing our own thing and we're all facing the same challenges. It's
We are.
just at the level of which we're faced with them. And
Hmm.
but it's how we overcome them and how we deal, how we face them is so important,
It
regardless,
is, it is
regardless.
so important. And um, I do believe in working really hard, but I also believe in empowering people who are underserved or disadvantaged because that does so, so, so much for the community around us. I want to just share as I was finishing up my undergraduate work in chemistry, I was so lucky and still am to this day so lucky to have had amazing mentors, amazing guides, amazing people who believed in me. I like to think I helped them believe in me because I always make working together fun. It should not be burdensome for anyone. We should have a good time. And it's a give and take relationship. Everything we do, whether I work with assistants or professors or whatever, it's all give and take. And we learn things from each other. So I realized that I was so blessed with having these abilities and these things or not abilities, excuse me, these experiences and the ability to get my undergraduate and hopefully then graduate degree in chemistry, I thought there's got to be a lot of blind people and visually impaired, low vision folks around me who don't necessarily um, have the same network or the same people saying you do whatever you want, no matter how visual the career might seem. Even my mom's colleagues, as a teacher of the visually impaired, would ask her, like, why do you support him studying chemistry? Isn't that going to make him crash and burn? And isn't it impractical? Chemistry is so darn visual. And I wanted to take these students without their parents for a weekend long chemistry camp. And we did this first camp in 2011 and proceeded to do 6 total camps where we brought through over 100 students from around the world. Unfortunately, we didn't work with anyone from Australia then, and taught them that their disability shouldn't hold them back from doing hardcore, hands-on organic chemistry that everybody told them was highly visual, right? So, and then I started learning from there and discovering that I have a responsibility in life just because of what's happened to me to help people with disabilities realize their dreams and achieve everything that they thought possible and not and more. But I just think the power of being a mentor and the power of seeing a path for someone before they see it for themselves, again, is very powerful in the whole world, but incredibly powerful in the disability world.
It it definitely is. And it's all around kindness and showing and giving a hand, isn't it?
Isn't
It's
it?
just sharing your experiences with no judgment and just, yeah, leading the way.
But
And
also
can I,
being tough. I'm not gonna stop that tough rhetoric. I'm tough on the people that I help.
Absolutely.
can
Absolutely.
I say, Hobie, it's very, very difficult to not get on your train. The
Yeah.
energy, the excitement, it's almost like you drag people along and go, I'm
Yeah.
doing
I
this,
haven't
whether
stopped
you like,
smiling.
no, whether you like it or not.
Thank you both.
And
That's very sweet of you to say.
it's the energy is just amazing.
You know
What
what I would
about,
do with my students? I got to tell you this really quick. With my students, I would pair 2 to 3 students up with blind adults, blind role models. And we did these camps on a piece of land that was about 100 hectares of wooded land, and it's actually a camp for the blind right near Napa, California. It's a very, very special place. And I would encourage them to go get lost. I'd say the longer you're gone, the more I know you're learning. I want you to feel safe doing things that are really uncomfortable, maybe almost falling off of hills and figuring out how to come back and get back to where we all are. So it's like go out with your blind mentor and get lost.
Yeah,
You know, that's how we learn.
that is
it is. It
amazing.
is. We have to, and I think we're in a society now where we wrap people up in cotton wool and or
Yeah, we
bubble
do.
wrap and just for the yes, but get out there. As I was a kid, we used to get out there and it's all about adventure because
I love it.
yeah, you'll always learn something when you're out in the big
And
world.
and I know that in Australia, naturally, there's so many places to just get out there in the wilderness
There is.
and explore.
Amazing.
There is.
I worry a little bit about the bugs and snakes because I'm not so familiar with with what the different ones are, but it's a great place to explore.
It's a beautiful country. There are some little creatures and slithery things that not so special, but we get through it.
I love
Hobie,
it.
with your experience, we know that society sometimes can be slow to catch up to people with
Yeah,
disabilities.
sure.
What changes would you like to see within the community, within society?
I think the most important thing that we need to do is not to be more accommodating and more accessible and run this sort of legal rhetoric, but just to develop an understanding that anybody can do anything they set their mind to. And I think the biggest change that we need to see isn't about making the world more physically available and accessible or accessible to folks with mental disabilities or whatever. It's about shifting that mindset to rather than saying, what can't you do, to really say, what can we do?
Yeah, that's so
And
true.
Yeah.
that was kind of a boring, dull answer. I'm
No,
sorry.
but it's
Oh,
so true. And it's yeah, you couldn't have said it better, to be honest.
mm.
Thank you. That's very
What
sweet
are
of
the
you.
most valuable lessons you've learned from living with your disability that you think everybody could benefit from?
Oh, that's a really good question. I can think of three. The first one is experience is what you get 5 seconds after you need it. You know, there have been times when I've really needed to know how to do a particular street crossing and just didn't as a blind person. And I realized, boy, I need to practice. I need to spend a little more time. The other one is that by slowing down and thinking things through and coming up with an action plan, you're so much more effective when you get out there and you do the thing that you set your mind to do than if you just jump in with both feet willy-nilly and do it. Now, I don't want your listeners or anyone for that matter to suffer from deep analysis paralysis where we think so much about something that we never get it done. But I do think measuring twice and cutting once is something that I've really learned. And the other thing from being blind, and this is pretty particular to me, is not being able to see people and having to approach them and talk to them has given me so many friends that I probably, if I was sighted, would never ever have because I would look at someone and judge them differently and not speak to them. I don't know if that's true, but I think maybe it is true. And I just feel so excited that I don't judge people or books by their covers.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. We're getting to the pointy end of the interview. Um, looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future, both for yourself and for society and the community?
I want everybody, whether they're disabled or not, to feel a sense of belonging in the world, a sense that we matter for a reason and we're here for a reason. For me, I'm having an interesting change in chapters with my career. It's not a big deal, but just moving some things around and adjusting them. And I'm going to be doing more to really home in for consumers, not necessarily business to business, but for consumers to understand the world around them through every sense other than eyesight. And that's adults and kids alike, just really embracing what they, you know, what they can do with their non-visual senses, from going out on a walk and smelling freshly cut grass to listening to birds chirping in the morning or smelling interesting things as you walk through your schoolyard if you're a kid, and putting a community together around this whole idea. There's a lot more to come on that, which I'll be sure to tell you guys about in the next 1 to 3 months. But we're really in the process of building and homing that in. The thing that I would say is just so important to me to remind everybody of, I need to remind myself of this too, which is that number one, we are enough. As long as each of us brings our personal best to the table, we're enough.
Oh,
Secondly, we're
wow.
not
I love
alone.
that. I absolutely love that.
What a
We're
way
enough.
what a way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
We are enough, and that is so true, Hobie.
And the other one is that we're not alone. We
Yeah.
are in this together. And we all have things that we're amazing at, and we just have to find what those are. But we are enough. We are not alone. And every single one of us has something they're amazing at. And it's my challenge to you to find that and run with it.
Oh, Hobie, I can't thank you enough. I feel like we need
I'm
to
so
have another discussion to
Yeah.
I love
continue because
this.
there's so much that, we haven't said, but your story is inspirational.
You're so
You are
kind.
energetic, you are raw, and I just wanted to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for
Oh,
opening yourself up today. And I'd love to stay in contact. We will have all of your details there for our listeners to
I,
be able to reach out. And we
I absolutely want to stay in contact. And if you ever want to do a follow-up, I would be more than honored. And quite on the contrary, I want to thank you both for doing what you're doing to bring education and awareness to this amazing, vibrant community that can do whatever the heck they want.
100%.
Hoby,
Thank
Thank you
you.
both.
thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to meet you.
I can't wait to meet you in person next time I'm over there.
It would be amazing to meet you in person also.
Thanks,
It'd be an honor.